You know that feeling when you're completely alone, but you just know you're being watched. That sudden chill in a warm room, a flicker of movement at the edge of your vision, or a whisper that seems to come from absolutely nowhere. Most of us just shake it off. We tell ourselves it's a draft, a trick of the light, or that our minds are just playing games with us. But what if they're not? What if these are little glimpses into a world that exists just beyond ours? A world inhabited by people who have passed on but, for whatever reason, decided not to leave. Tonight, we're not talking about campfire tales or scary movies. We're pulling back the curtain on 5 of the most terrifying, baffling, and supposedly true paranormal stories ever documented. These aren't just legends, they're accounts backed by historical records, eyewitnesses, and in some cases, modern paranormal investigations. From the crushing despair of America's first penitentiary to a house frantically built for ghosts. These stories are tied to our reality by tragedy, mystery, and fear. So dim the lights, get comfortable, and get ready to question everything you thought you knew about the line between the living and the dead. These are 5 true stories that are guaranteed to keep you awake tonight. The Haunting of Eastern State Penitentiary ****. Our first story takes us to Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, to a place that looks like a medieval fortress was dropped right into the middle of a modern city. Its high, stone walls and intimidating guard towers cast long, dark shadows, not just on the streets, but on the history of justice itself. This is Eastern State Penitentiary, a place designed not just to hold a person's body, but to shatter their spirit. And a lot of people think those shattered spirits are still there, trapped in a sentence that never ends. Built back in 1829, Eastern State was a revolutionary and, frankly, terrifying experiment. It was the world's first real penitentiary, based on a Quaker idea that if you put an inmate in total isolation, they would become penitent and regret their sins. They called it the Pennsylvania system. When a prisoner arrived, a black hood was pulled over their head. They were led in total silence to a stark, concrete cell with nothing but a single skylight, known as the Eye of God, and that's where they stayed, alone, for years. They ate alone, they exercised alone in a tiny attached yard, and they were never allowed to speak to or even see another human being. The silence was absolute, only broken by the soft footsteps of guards patrolling the vaulted, church-like hallways. As you can imagine, the psychological damage of this isolation was devastating. For most, it didn't lead to quiet reflection. It led to madness. The halls that were supposed to be silent were filled with the sounds of men tapping on pipes, desperate for any kind of human contact. The prison's own records show that many inmates went insane, screaming, wailing, and talking to themselves for hours on end, and if you broke the rule of silence, the punishments were horrific. There was the iron gag, a device that clamped a prisoner's tongue to their wrists, which were tied behind their back. Any movement would tear the tongue and cause it to bleed. There was the water bath, where inmates were dunked in freezing water and then chained to a wall overnight in the winter until a sheet of ice formed on their skin. And then there was the hole, a pitch-black underground cell with no light, no toilet, and barely any food, where prisoners were sometimes left for weeks. Eastern State was a place of unbelievable human misery for 142 years before it was finally shut down in 1971. But it seems the misery never really left. Almost as soon as it was abandoned, reports of paranormal activity started pouring out of the decaying cell. Staff, visitors, and ghost hunters have all been telling the same scary stories for decades. One of the most haunted spots is the infamous Cell Block 12. People have repeatedly reported hearing a horrifying, evil-sounding cackling echoing from the empty cells. Sometimes it's laughter, other times it's pained screams or disembodied whispers that seem to follow you down the hall. In Cell Block 4, people have seen ghostly faces appear out of nowhere, their expressions twisted in pain, only to vanish seconds later. And in Cell Block 6, shadowy figures are seen darting along the walls, moving way too fast to be human. Maybe the most famous inmate was the gangster Al Capone, who did 8 months here in 1929. Even though his cell was pretty fancy compared to the others, Capone was supposedly terrified during his stay. He was heard screaming at night, begging a ghost he called Jimmy to leave him alone. Many think this was the spirit of James Clark, one of the men Capone had ordered killed in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. The legend says Jimmy's ghost tortured Capone in that cell and haunted him for the rest of his life. But it's not just the prisoners who stick around. A dark, menacing figure is often seen standing in one of the guard towers, a place that's been impossible to get to for decades, because the stairs rotted away long ago. Nobody knows who this figure is, but seeing a solid silhouette watching you from an empty, inaccessible tower has chilled countless visitors to the bone. One of the most intense stories came from a locksmith named Gary Johnson, who was hired in the 90s to work on the old cell doors. While working on a lock in cell block 4, he said he was suddenly grabbed by a force he couldn't see. It held him so tight he was completely paralyzed. He said he felt this overwhelming wave of pure negative energy as visions of tormented faces swirled on the walls around him. Just as suddenly, the force let him go, and he saw a shadowy figure dart away down the hall. Today, Eastern State Penitentiary is a museum and a ruin, a monument to a dark time in history. But for anyone who has walked its lonely corridors, heard the whispers, seen the shadows, or felt that oppressive weight of despair, it's something more. It's a place where the suffering of the past is so deeply burned into the stone that it just keeps playing on a loop, a never-ending sentence for the spirits trapped inside. The Winchester Mystery House ****. Our next story takes us to San Jose, California, to a mansion that might be the strangest and most bizarre home ever built. It's a massive, sprawling mess of Victorian design, a maze of rooms, staircases, and hallways that make absolutely no sense. This is the Winchester Mystery House, a home built with a massive fortune, driven by deep grief, and all because of a terrifying prophecy. This house wasn't built for the living, it was built for the dead. Story is all about one woman, Sarah Winchester, the heiress to the Winchester Repeating Arms Company fortune. Her husband William was the treasurer of the company that made the famous Winchester rifle, often called the gun that won the West. While that gun brought her family incredible wealth, it also brought incredible tragedy. In 1866, her baby, daughter Annie, died just weeks after she was born. Then, in 1881, her husband William died of tuberculosis. Sarah was left a widow with a fortune that would be worth over $500 million today. But she was completely consumed by grief. Looking for answers, Sarah supposedly went to see a spiritualist medium in Boston. The medium gave her a chilling message. She told Sarah that her family and her fortune were cursed, haunted by the spirits of every single person who had ever been killed by a Winchester rifle. The spirits wanted revenge, and they were the ones who had killed her husband and child. The medium then gave Sarah a very strange set of instructions. She had to move west, buy a house, and start building, and she could never, ever stop. As long as the sound of hammers could be heard, the spirits would be kept away. The moment the building stopped, the medium warned, Sarah would die. Sarah took this prophecy to heart. She moved to California in 1884 and bought a small 8-room farmhouse, and then the construction began. For the next 38 years, right up until the day she died, the work never stopped. Carpenters worked in shifts, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. The little farmhouse grew into a huge, chaotic mansion with no master blueprint. It's said that Sarah would hold seances every night in a special room to get her building plans directly from the spirits. The result is a house that makes no logical sense. The mansion is over 24,000 square feet and has 160 rooms. There are staircases that go straight up to the ceiling, doors that open onto solid walls, and windows that just look into other rooms instead of outside. There's a strange obsession with the number 13. Many rooms have 13 windows or 13 wall panels, and chandeliers were made to hold 13 candles. This maze-like design was on purpose. It was meant to confuse the angry spirits that Sarah believed were hunting her. The endless hallways, secret passages, and dead ends were a trap to keep her safe. One of the weirdest places in the house is the seance room, right in the heart of the mansion. This room has only one way in, but 3 ways out. One is the door you came in. Another is a secret panel that leads to a straight 8-foot drop into the kitchen sink below. The third is a tiny door that opens into a maze of other rooms. This is where Sarah would supposedly go every night at midnight, ring a tower bell to call the spirits, and then ring it again at 2 a.m. to send them away. She believed she got all her architectural plans right here, from the other side. Even with all these bizarre precautions, the house is said to be incredibly haunted. For decades, visitors and staff have reported all kinds of paranormal activity. People hear footsteps walking down empty hallways, doorknobs turning by themselves, and whispers coming from empty rooms. Cold spots are felt all over, especially in the seance room and the bedroom where Sarah eventually died. People also claim to see ghosts. One of the most common is the spirit of a workman nicknamed Clyde, who is often seen pushing a wheelbarrow in the basement or trying to fix a fireplace in the ballroom. Tour guides have reported seeing a man in old-timey work clothes, only for him to vanish around a corner. Another common sight is of shadowy figures that dart around corners or appear in windows. Too fast to get a good look at, but definitely human-shaped. And then there's the spirit of Sarah Winchester herself. Her ghost has been seen in different parts of the house she spent a lifetime building. Some have seen a small, frail woman in a Victorian dress gliding through the halls. One tour guide, after her group had left a room, heard a loud sigh in the hallway. When she went to check, she saw a small, ghostly shape disappear around a corner. The constant construction finally stopped on September 5, 1922, when Sarah Winchester died in her sleep at the age of 83. Just like the prophecy said, the moment the hammers fell silent, she passed away. The Winchester Mystery House is a paradox, a beautiful, expensive mansion built not for comfort, but out of pure fear. It's a monument to one woman's grief, and a chilling testament to the desperate things she did to escape the ghosts of her family's legacy, whether it was all in her head or she was truly talking to spirits. The house she left behind continues to baffle and terrify everyone who walks its confusing halls. The Haunted House on the Hill, **** for our fourth story. We're moving away from historical landmarks to a modern-day nightmare, a story that proves hauntings aren't just a thing of the past. This one takes us to a rural farmhouse in Tennessee, a place that became ground zero for a relentless haunting that tormented a modern family. Their experience got so bad that it brought in one of the most famous paranormal investigation teams in the world. The story is about a family who bought their dream home, an old farmhouse with a long history. Like anyone moving into a new house, they were excited about their future there, but it didn't take long for them to figure out they weren't the only ones living in the house. The activity started with strange and often startling noises. They'd be sitting in one part of the house and suddenly hear loud, violent crashing sounds coming from another room. When they'd rush to see what happened, they'd find nothing out of place. No furniture flipped over, no broken glass, nothing to explain the sound of complete chaos they had just heard. These phantom crashes started happening all the time, shattering the peace of their new home and putting the family constantly on edge. Besides the sounds, a creepier feeling started to set in, the constant, overwhelming sensation of being watched. Family members all said they felt a heavy presence in the rooms with them, like unseen eyes were following their every move. It was a kind of psychological torture that made every corner of the house feel unsafe. The family's fear turned to pure terror when they caught what they believe is solid proof of the haunting. On their home security cameras, they recorded a dark shadow moving all by itself. In one chilling clip, you can see a distinct, human-shaped shadow pass in front of the kitchen refrigerator, moving in a way that just can't be explained by light or reflection. This wasn't just a feeling or a sound anymore. It was a visible intruder in their home. And it wasn't from this world. Desperate for help, the family reached out to the Atlantic Paranormal Society, better known as TAPS, the team from the show Ghost Hunters. The investigators, along with rock legend Meat Loaf, who was a guest investigator for this case, went to the Tennessee farmhouse to see if they could experience what the family was going through. The TAPS investigation didn't take long to confirm the family's story. As they set up their equipment for the night, they started experiencing things too. Their audio recorders picked up tons of unexplained sounds, including knocks that seemed to intelligently respond to their questions. They recorded disembodied voices whispering in empty rooms. The team members themselves heard footsteps and other noises that had no logical source. Most importantly, the TAPS team also captured their own visual evidence. During the investigation, their cameras also recorded unexplained shadows moving through the house. Just like the family's security footage had, the combination of personal experiences, strange audio, and video evidence led the seasoned investigators to agree that the farmhouse was definitely haunted. The team looked into the property's history and found out it was very old. Several families had lived there over the decades, and like any old property, it had seen its share of life and death. One previous family had 9 children, and one of them, a young boy named Jimmy, had died at a young age. The investigators wondered if this little boy's spirit could be one of the ghosts in the home, which might explain the sounds of children's laughter that the current owners had also reported hearing. The TAPS investigation brought the family some comfort, not because it got rid of the ghost, but because it proved their terrifying experience was real. They weren't going crazy. Their fear was justified. The story of the Tennessee farmhouse is a powerful, modern tale of a family terrorized by the Paranormal, it shows just how personal and frightening a haunting can be, where the one place you're supposed to feel safest becomes the source of your greatest fear. It proves that a ghost story doesn't have to be ancient to be absolutely terrifying. Personal account: the unseen guest in a historic hotel **** for our final story. We're stepping away from famous haunted places and into the world of personal experience, because sometimes the scariest encounters are the ones that happen to regular people in regular places, with no warning and no explanation. This is a story about a couple's weekend getaway that turned into a night of pure terror, and it's a good reminder that you don't have to go looking for the paranormal for it to find you. The couple was looking for a quiet trip and checked into a beautiful, historic hotel. To protect their privacy, we'll just call it the Belmont Hotel. It was one of those old classic places with ornate furniture and long hallways that seemed to hold the echoes of the past. They got a room on the second to last floor, tired from their trip and just looking forward to a peaceful night. But almost as soon as they got into their room, a strange and unsettling feeling washed over both of them at the same time. It wasn't a cold spot or a weird noise, but a powerful, distinct feeling of being watched. They tried to ignore it, telling themselves it was just the unfamiliar old building, but the feeling was real, and they both felt it. It was as if a third person was in the room with them, standing silently in a corner, just staring at them. The air felt heavy, and a sense of dread started to creep in, even though they were uneasy. They were exhausted and eventually fell asleep. But they didn't sleep for long. At exactly 3 a.m., a time often linked to paranormal activity, they were both jolted awake by a loud, obvious noise coming from right above their room. It was the sound of heavy furniture being dragged, slowly and deliberately across a wooden floor. Scrape, drag, stop, scrape, drag, stop. It was so loud it sounded like someone was rearranging a whole room of heavy oak dressers right above their heads. Annoyed and now wide awake, they figured it was just rude guests or maybe hotel staff doing some kind of late-night work. The noise kept going, a grating heavy sound that echoed through their room for what felt like forever. Finally, they'd had enough and called the front desk to complain. The response from the night clerk wasn't what they expected. A pause on the phone, then a confused, hesitant voice. The clerk told them that what they were hearing was impossible. There was no one in the room above them. In fact, there was no room above them. The floor directly above their room was an old, unused attic. It had been sealed off for years and was completely inaccessible. A cold wave of fear washed over the couple as they processed what the clerk had said. The heavy, dragging sound was still faintly audible from upstairs. Then the clerk added something that made their blood run even colder. He told them that they weren't the first guests to report this. Over the years, many people staying in that exact room had called the front desk in the middle of the night, complaining about the exact same noise, heavy furniture being dragged across the floor of the sealed attic. No one had ever found an explanation. The rest of the night was sleepless. Every creak of the old hotel, every whisper of the wind, now sounded like a threat. The feeling of being watched got even stronger, and they spent the next few hours huddled together listening to the silence from the floor above, a silence that was now even scarier than the noise had been. They couldn't shake the image from their minds. Some unseen person, some ghostly guest, stuck doing an endless nightly chore in a dark, dusty attic, forever dragging the furniture of a room that didn't even exist anymore. They checked out first thing the next morning, leaving the Belmont Hotel and its unseen guests behind. This story is a chilling reminder that spirits aren't just in graveyards or abandoned asylums. They can be anywhere in the room next to you, the hallway outside your door, or maybe in the sealed-off floor right above your head, just waiting for the middle of the night to start their work. These stories are more than just spooky tales. They're based on documented events, historical records, and personal experiences that blur the line between our world and whatever is next. And what you've heard is just a tiny piece of what's out there. The shadows are full of stories. If you've ever had an experience you couldn't explain, a moment that made you second-guess reality, share it in the comments below. We read all of them, because sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that really happened. And if you want to explore more of the dark and mysterious corners of the world with us, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what we have coming up. Liking the video also really helps us reach more people who, like you, are brave enough to listen. From the tormented souls at Eastern State to the unseen guest in that hotel, the patterns are as undeniable as they are terrifying. Shadowy figures, voices from nowhere, objects moving on their own. It's like these are the classic signatures of a haunting. They're the echoes of tragedies so deep they permanently stain a location. Whether these things are caused by conscious spirits, some kind of leftover energy, or something else we can't even comprehend, one thing is certain: countless, believable people have experienced them throughout history. It forces you to face that uncomfortable possibility that we aren't alone, that the past isn't always gone, and that death might not be the final curtain. So tonight, when you turn off the lights and the house starts making its usual creaks and groans, listen a little closer. What you hear might not be the house settling. It might be something else entirely. Sleep well if you can.